You're listening to Unbridled with your host, Genevieve and Carly. Welcome to Unbridled.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm your host, Genevieve.
And I'm Carly.
And this is the Unbridled Talk Show. And today we have a very special guest, Sailor Endres. Did I say it right? Endres. Oh,
close.
And she is an equine nutritionist.
I don't like to claim myself as a nutritionist just yet. I do really look forward to going to get my master's, but I try to claim that I'm a nutrition specialist or a product specialist because I do work really a lot with both. And I'm lucky that I get the option to kind of work with a lot of the manufacturers and the nutritionists that develop them as well. So I won't claim nutritionist just yet, but we're getting there.
That's so
soon.
cool, though. Yeah. And so how did you get into horses? Like, what was your first introduction to horseback riding?
When I grew up actually near Baltimore City, which people are always like, wow, why?
Right.
Like how?
Right.
I begged my parents when I was 6 years old to go to sleepaway camp. They're like, dude, you're 6. You're not going to sleepaway camp. Like, that's ridiculous. Well, by 7, they finally were like, fine, go, whatever. And by 8, I was home. I was gone the whole summer. I was riding all summer long, and it wasn't super accessible back home. So that was where I went, and I rode my heart out as much as I could. And I couldn't be stopped. I started teaching when I was at summer camp. And it was so funny. My mom used to be like, oh, I'm sure it's just a phase. Like, it'll be whatever. And then I was like, I'm going to go to college for large animal and veterinary science. And she was like, oh, okay. I was like, do you think it's still a phase? And then I got my first horse. Do you think it's still a phase? I don't know. I graduated, like now this is my lifestyle. And she's like, and she's a great supporter. So it's just so funny that she was so like, what is going on? Like, you grew up in Baltimore City and now you're like this country girl that's cutting hay all year long and riding horses. Like, who are you?
It just kind of sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I was hooked ever since. And when I went to college at the University of Maine. I was on the equestrian drill team there, which was a blast. I was kind of something new. I always describe that for people who don't know as like synchronized swimming on horseback with no water. This is probably the best way that I can explain it. But that was a super fun time. I also was a cheerleader throughout that. So I worked with a lot of the different like athletics over there. So I tried as best I could to kind of merge like social life and horse life. But yeah, I got into the nutrition side of things. One of the vets that we had there that taught, he was also focused in dentistry, which was a huge part of that as well. And we used to host the big Farriers Association there. So I got really into the feet side of things as well. And I started realizing that it all comes from the gut.
Yep.
And that seemed to be my way. So when I graduated, I came down back home to Maryland, and I ran a rescue in Southern Maryland for 2 years. That was 29 head of horses,
Wow.
me and 2 other workers. And I mean, rescues are enough in themselves, let alone figuring out how to adjust them and get them comfortable, all of the stress and adjusting all of that to get the gut back to where it's supposed to be was kind of what made me realize that that's what I went to school for, and that's what I like to do. So I got an awesome opportunity to work for a local feed store, where through that, I mean, I've worked with tons of different manufacturers and nutritionists through them, which I'm very grateful for them and all of their help. I've worked with Dr. Marty Adams. He's one of the Cargill nutritionists. He works a lot with the Pro Elite products. Michael Eggleston, he's the Chemin Industries. Mm-hmm. Anything you hear about the new chromium is a huge thing. He talks a lot about that stuff. I've gotten, if I don't know the answer, I know someone who does. And that's what I have a really, really strong support system and a good resource team. So I'm very, very lucky to be where I am right now and be able to present my new company, Alfa Equine, to the community. Because if it weren't for them and my mom and my dad and, my wife and all my supporters, I would not be able to be doing what I'm doing. So I'm very grateful. And my beautiful new farm, I mean, I'm just on cloud 9 right now. So,
So when did you launch your business?
I officially launched in September.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Yes, very, very exciting. Yeah. And so my dad's side of the family lives in Northern Maryland. So I'm up there all the time. And I just started realizing there's horses everywhere. And I'm just seeing it constantly that people can benefit from this.
Yeah.
Really getting to know their horses on that. I'm going to probably say it a million times today, but understanding them on the cellular level and being able to really set them up for success. And that's where I'm at with my rescue background. I was like, I care about the horse. That's what I'm here for. And that's why working with so many products, I'm not tied down to a certain manufacturer, that I can truly do what works for the owner and the horse together and really get them where they need to be based on, all of this data that I'm kind of collecting through these evaluations.
Yeah.
So it's been a really exciting process. I've amazed myself a few times. I've gotten to work with all sorts of different types of horses, different breeds, different disciplines. And I've been learning, and that's another thing. I love learning. So I've been able to continue to learn about all of this. And I get someone who calls me and I'm like, I've never even seen that before. Let me do all the research that I can, and then I'll get back to you. So I'm constantly on databases and learning about other things that they're coming up with.
It's so important, right? To continue educating. And we preach that, I think, with the kids that are studying within the organization. We're like, you have to have a passion for learning and just stay curious.
Right.
Like always be drilling into what you don't know.
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I am kind of between is there's so much new research and there's still so many older horse owners. So I'm coming into contact with people who are still so stuck in ways that maybe we've found, not that they're bad, but better ways to manage it that have better outcomes or more outcomes than just one specific thing. Also the fads. There are so many fads in the horse world right now. I'll probably get backlash for this, but I don't even care. Everyone's horses have ulcers. Yep. That's a huge one. Soy is so bad. It's not like we've been feeding soy forever or anything, but soy's terrible. And there's a certain place and time for everything. And that's why being able to make a specialized feed program for that horse or for that barn that matches what they're doing is so important, because we get people sometimes that come in and they just want what's on sale. They're not even looking for that. So it's just such a big world, and it's hard to expect horse owners to know every single product that's on the market and know what's even out there. If you've always fed Purina, you've never heard of ADM nutrition, like these other companies that have put crazy research into stuff. So it's definitely been fun.
Right. Well, it's definitely something we were talking about on the live, is plugging into a community and getting feedback from other professionals when you get into horse ownership. And I just cut Carly off, so I don't want you to lose your thought though.
I was just going to say that is so important what you're doing, because as I was preparing for this podcast, I was trying to find other podcasts on horse nutrition and like the most latest research, etc. And it was really hard to find anything that has even been published within the past 12 months. Like everything that I could find that seemed like it was actually like scientifically researched or professionals, it was honestly done within the last 2 years and goes back as far as like 9 years. And I'm like, how relevant is that at this point? I'm sure there's been more scientific data. And so it's just so great that you're offering all of this. Yeah.
And I can provide a little bit of insight to that. There's the biggest one for the longest time have always been the universities, right? They are providing the most research, which is awesome. So that's why it's so important to give back, fund the universities, support them. They are doing a lot of the legwork when it comes to updated research. Purina has always boasted their beautiful research center. I had the pleasure of going there. It is absolutely amazing. The things that they do and they test, the way that they test these horses, I mean, it's ways that you wouldn't even think about how to get that result, right? And they're doing awesome work there. Kemin Industries is a huge one. Their equine side of things has been providing like technology ingredients for so long. It's really awesome to see all the different research that's coming through. Some other nutritionists that I love to follow, another podcast, I'll shout out the Feed Room Chemist. She's the biggest one probably, is Dr. Jimmy Nichols. She's awesome. She's had a ton of other nutritionists as well. Lindsay Burr is great. Rachel Mote is amazing. Michael Eggleston, if you can find any of his stuff. There are some really great people who are putting out good quality, information on that updated research that we might not be able to find yet. So those are some really good resources if anybody's who's listening wants to kind of dive into certain things. I'm all about, I listen to them, right? That's my discourse. So that's what I'm doing in my spare time.
No, that's huge. And that's kind of where I wanted to kick off, right? Is where do you start? You're a new horse owner, right? And here's the thing, a lot of new horse owners get the pony and then they're like, oh no, now what do I do with it? As far as getting their kid a pony, and now they bring it home because they have the ability to. But when you're at home, you don't have the resources you might have at a boarding facility. You don't necessarily have that feedback from people who've been in the industry. So at what point do people consult with you? How do they get a baseline on a new pony or an existing pony?
There's no perfect time, right? Any time is better than none. And I try to make what I do as accessible as possible, because I do get a lot of those where they're like, I don't know, my kid wanted to ride a horse and now we ended up with one and I got to pay for it and I don't know how to take care of it. Yeah. What do I do? And so I really try to tailor my personal services to that. What is the situation? Is it a boarding barn? Is it a pony? Is it a thoroughbred? Is it, mom's horse, shared horse? Is it a performance horse? Is it a leisure horse? It all depends. But in that case where, you're bringing home your horse for the first time, I've done a few pre-purchase, where I've had close friends that say, will you come out and let me know? Because this horse just doesn't look right. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I don't like its body condition. Its coat is dull. It seems like some weight just needs to be moved around. So I might come out, find out what it's eating, and be able to start them off on the right foot. I'm always I'm huge for letting the horse settle first. I don't want to make any changes if you're bringing the horse home until it's settled into its new environment, whether it be a boarding barn, at home, whether they've been on hay and dry lot only and you're moving them to grass. We want to make sure that they're completely comfortable and back into the groove of their new home before we go changing anything major. Hopefully people start getting onto the trend and we won't have to make that many changes, right? People are going to start getting it right and sticking with it. And that's the other thing, is people see one thing change and they want to just change everything. And without picking one thing at a time and creating a plan and setting a goal, we're not able to see what is affecting what's going on. If we go and change the feed and add a bunch of supplements, you don't know what's doing it. And you may be wasting money on all of these things and, wasting volume intake for your horse when it could be absorbing the nutrients that the feed can actually offer. Yeah. So there, like I said, there's no good or bad time. I think any time that someone wants to learn their horse on a cellular level and get to understand how they can provide for their horse. And that's why I promote my business as an investment management consultation company, because horses are an investment. We are putting so much money into our horses, into our fields, into our facilities, that, why wouldn't you set them and yourself up for success? Right.
No, that's so important.
Right.
Makes sense. So trying to teach people how to be able to manage and juggle that.
Yeah. When we were on our live, Carly, actually, I feel like it was yesterday, but it may have been the day before when we were summing up an interview. You were like, someone told you that if you feed the right feeds, you shouldn't have to feed a bunch of supplements.
You sent me a little outline of questions before just to get me on the right track. And one of them was, what supplements should you feed your horse? Why? What about this? And I literally wrote on my paper in big stars, anti-supplement. I cannot agree with that more. And how many people, when I get there and they're like, well, my horse isn't responding to this. And okay, well, what do you feed it? They give me this laundry list of supplements. So I'm like, well, we're not so anytime I do an evaluation, my number one is, your horse best, right? Obviously, if it's a pre-purchase, you might not. But in that case, that's not a super common one that I do. Your horse best. What it responds to the best. What feed you liked that horse on the most, how well it performed. So it's your horse. If you have a supplement and you like it and you see the result and you want to pay for it, by all means, I will support you. It's not affecting me. Yeah. I'm not going to lose sleep at night if you want to pay for a supplement and you feel that it's working for you and you are seeing results out of your horse. That's the point. Mm-hmm. As long as you're meeting that goal. So when we do a nutritional evaluation, I beg my horse owners to pull all supplements. Obviously,
Yeah.
you know, if you are on a vet recommended supplement or a joint supplement that you're seeing progress, or a medication, you know, obviously I'm not going to tell you to take your horse off Presend because I don't believe in it. That's a little bit of a different story. But a big one right now is people are throwing horses on biotin,
Yeah.
or they're throwing them on an oil that they may not even benefit from. There's so many different supplements out there. And if you look down the shelf, you know, you see this whole section of calming supplements or gut supplements, and they all might be one ingredient off.
Yeah.
So which one do you choose, right? So,
Right.
but also backing up, why do we need it?
Yeah.
We need to come to the root of it. It's so easy to get caught by the marketing on all of these things when we're not looking that we could be fixing it from that cellular level and learning our horse more and learning and feeding it properly for what it needs and for what we're doing with it. So yes, I always ask them to drop supplements and let's see what the feed can do first.
Yeah.
Let's feed it at the proper feeding rate. I joke all the time that the number one part of my job is to tell you to read the directions, which is horrible. And some people look at me like I'm so rude for saying that. But a lot of times they're like, well, it's not working. I'm like, okay, well, you know, let's be honest about how much you're riding, right?
Yeah.
I've had calls too where they're like, my horse, I took your recommendation and my horse has gone wild. And I said, okay, well, let's go over, you know, what we looked at and let's make adjustments. And I say, well, how are you still riding, you know, 5 days a week, walk, trot, canter, you know? And, oh, well, you know, it got cold and I haven't been riding as much. Well, yeah, of course he's a ticking time bomb out in the field because we're supplying him all this energy and we're not doing anything with it. So yeah, when you pull him in and there's a little chill in the air, I can't say I'm surprised that he's, you know, bucking. So I do like to tell people they have to be really honest. Let's pull supplements. Let's see what the feed can do. Let's follow the directions, you know, feed it the way the manufacturer was intending to feed it.
Yeah.
Right? They even tell you on the bag, this is how much for this life stage of the horse, right? You see idle, maintenance, light activity, heavy, moderate, whatever. So you pick that. Then you go across and it might have the weights. If you, in this case, probably closer to the 800-pound range. Well, should be at the 800-pound range for the size ponies you guys are using.
Yeah.
Right.
But we might get into my mare, who is a, you know, invitation only bred paint horse, who will never be less than 1,250 pounds at 15 3 hands like that.
Yeah.
She's just built that way.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that variation. We always want to feed to where we want to be, right? But when we're feeding down for these obese horses, we have to consider that we still have to meet that nutrient requirement. So we have to make some adjustments there. A lot of times on feeding directions, if you look at the top, it tells you how much hay that size horse should be getting. If your horse is on a round bale 24/7, it's getting significantly more than it's being offered. So can we bring that number down? Well, we have to consider, are we going to lose those required vitamins and minerals?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then that's where balancers have become a really common popular feed for those overweight, founder prone tendency ponies, not just ponies. There's more than just ponies, but I know in this case, that's a big one. But reading the directions is so huge because it tells you exactly how to feed it. So if we're not doing what the manufacturer intended it to do, we can't really be upset that it's not providing or performing the way that we want it to.
And you're right. A lot of
then in
people,
that
the
case-
tendency is just throw more supplements instead of like adjusting anything with your feed.
Throw more supplements,
Right.
throw more grain, but they're grazers, right? I'm always, I don't like to claim that I am a holistic, like I look at things holistically, but I look at them holistically in the fact that I'm looking at the whole picture, right? In my horse profile, I want to know when the last time your horse was dewormed,
Mhm.
when the last time your horse had its teeth done. Did it have any body work? Were there any major injuries? You know, change in, like, what time of year is it, right? Change in season. Are we losing hay quality? Did you find a new supplier for hay? Have you tested your hay is a huge one. If you have your horse at home, have you had your soil tested? When's the last time you overseeded? There's so many back factors that we're not seeing. So people just add more, add the supplements, add the fat, add the rice bran, add the oil, add it all because something has to fix it.
Yeah.
And volume has been such a huge, with that fad, you know, going up and up, volume has been such an issue. horses' stomachs are only like this big. A lot of people don't realize that. They're not very big. So when we are shoving 6 pounds per feeding into a horse, whether it be alfalfa pellets, a feed, supplement pellets, that still accounts for volume when it comes up to that much. We don't want ponies. I really don't prefer them to have more than 3 to 4 pounds per feeding.
Yeah.
Large horses, 5 to 6 pounds max is like 6 pounds per feeding is big horses. And even then, I still don't prefer them to have that much.
Yeah.
And with the bigger horses, we're noticing that the lower volume approaches are actually doing better. So when I go into a thoroughbred farm and they're like, well, I'm feeding it 16 pounds of grain a day. And I say, you're going to think I'm crazy, but we're going to put it on X amount of balancer and only this much concentrated grain. And it's going to be eating 6 pounds a day. And they're like, what? That's not going to work. And I'm like, please just trust me.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, because they're actually able to absorb all the nutrients, they're getting everything out of the feed as it was intended. We're making sure we're reaching the vitamin and nutrient minimums with the balancer. And there's so many different products. It depends on how you want to do it, but you have to look at the big picture. You can't just look at the shelf and pick your favorite pretty label for what you need. Because that's a lot of times, I think, what happens.
You mentioned calmer, and I know in our sport in particular, because it's really racing on horseback and you've got 40 ponies in an arena at a time competing actively against each other. There are a lot of ponies that just naturally have a higher energy, drive, anxiety level. And a lot of people do gravitate towards adding magnesium into their feed, like those calmer supplements. Do you feel like there's any benefit ever in utilizing a supplement like magnesium?
I do. I will always preach, you again, your horse best. And I do think that certain supplements in that case can work. I think that it's important to pick a goal and pick a time frame.
Sure.
A lot of times on a supplement, there's a loading dose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say it's a 30 days or you buy a container and it's a 30-day, amount. We pick a goal, right? We say we have 30 days and this is what I want to see. If you go to 3, games or barrel races, whatever you're doing, and your horse is still, not wanting to go in the gate or not performing how you want it to, obviously it's not doing anything, right? So it's not working. So you don't need to keep giving it to them.
Yeah.
Again, if you like it and it reaches that goal for you and you want to pay for it, I will support you.
Yeah.
100%. So it really does come down to the horse and deciding what works for you, what works in your program. It also doesn't help when you have giant feeding programs, right? If we got 20 horses in a barn, feeding something like that across the whole board is going to turn into a major, it's more work,
it's a lot of
right?
money. It's a lot of work.
If you turn into like witch's brew in a cauldron every time you're trying to make grain, because you've got to pour a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some of this. Oh, this horse has to get this, but this one can't get it. It becomes very frustrating. But of all of the calming stuff, I do really like the effects of magnesium. There isn't a whole, there's some research that kind of goes both ways. And I'll say it again, it's all about the horse. Your horse may respond great to it, and your best friend's horse may not respond to it at all. It really just depends on how the body responds. You also have to consider what your horse is eating and what is made up of. So if my horse is eating, say, Triple Crown Senior Gold, I need to look at that and see if I'm supplementing magnesium, I may already be supplementing it, right? It may already be a supplement in the feed, and you're feeding, Purina Senior Active, and maybe there's a difference there. So when we're supplementing things, we could be giving more or less, or, causing a deficiency in certain vitamins and minerals that we don't even realize. So that's another way that we might see that horses don't respond to it as well as another horse in the barn might.
Yeah. You mentioned ulcers, and ulcers are a huge topic, and it's a huge controversy too. I know everyone's like, oh, it's got ulcers, start there. Like, your horse is bucking its ulcers. Like,
yeah. A lot of people aren't even taking their horses to the vet anymore.
Yeah.
They're just buying a month's worth of ulcer guard and saying, well, it was a little cinchy today. Yep. Well, hopefully it fits. Or hopefully it stops bucking every time I get on. Ulcer guard is the most, accessible omeprazole option. You can get it compounded from your vet. You can get scoping done. when it comes down to it, I mean, we see the signs of ulcers, right? But there are mutual symptoms of ulcers that may be other things, irritability, behavioral issues, pain in the back or the shoulder or anything like that, hindgut. Something people don't, acidosis, grass changes, sugar spike, the gut's uncomfortable. It's not always meaning that there's ulcers formed in the stomach.
Is there any harm in preventatively treating with Ulcer Guard?
So the way Ulcer Guard is supposed to be used, right, is we're supposed to have our horses on an empty stomach, which
most
is
people don't.
Generally what causes ulcers. So that always kind of was a red flag for me. So you're supposed to give it in the morning, right? You put them on the stall. They're supposed to be done their hay. They're supposed to have an empty stomach for a little bit. You give it to them, and the point is to coat their stomach.
Okay.
Do I think that it has a negative effects? I think that the same way, if we take, one ibuprofen for a year straight, in a year, one ibuprofen is not going to cut it.
Yeah.
We're going to need to we're going to start building resistance to it. I don't think that it won't work. I don't think it will have negative effects per se, but I don't know that using a treatment as a preventative is necessarily going to be the best idea down the line. Because then when we actually have ulcers, and it's not just so we think anymore, we've already used up all of our resistance to the Ulcer Guard, which is the most accessible treatment right now.
That makes sense.
It really comes down to the gut. If we can feed the horse well and properly with good quality ingredients in what it's supposed to absorb in small volumes and forage first, all of these things, we should be able to manage the gut. There's other ways of prevention that are just as effective, I think, without knowing. Again, obviously, if you really think your horse has ulcers, please go to see your vet. Bring your vet out.
Right.
Have them scope, but like I said, a lot of vets right now aren't even scoping. They're just giving you a prescription for it and telling you to do it.
Yep.
Which is kind of unfortunate.
So backing up, big picture for kids who are getting into this or parents who are getting into this, high level difference between ponies and horses, metabolically, how you feed them, how you approach it. Is there a difference at all?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say it. I think I've already said it maybe 12 times today, and I'm going to keep saying it. It varies by horse. You have to know your horse and what your horse responds to, and what products are available to you. Because again, if we're not knowing what we're feeding it, we may be just feeding it poorly, and we're actually the ones, we're killing them with our love, right? Like the treats constantly. Oh, I feel bad because his neighbor gets, 2 scoops of grain, so I'm going to give him 2 scoops. We love our horses, but we're killing them by not, considering that this is an issue. Obviously, when you put a thoroughbred and a pony next to each other, ponies are generally easier keepers. We may have some that don't keep as well. We may have different breeds of ponies that keep better than others. They are generally more on the high metabolic side. And the thoroughbreds are generally on the harder keeper side.
Yeah.
The hard part with the ponies that carry a lot of weight is in what you guys do, at least, the high performance overweight ponies, we still have to supply enough calories and enough energy to get through that. We need enough stamina. We need enough energy to get through those spurts of high energy, activity. And I imagine with what you guys do, I mean, you guys are conditioning regularly. That's not something you just wake up and you're like, oh, I want to go to a race this weekend. My horse can handle it. Like, your ponies are conditioned to do that.
Yeah.
A big issue with, metabolic and ponies are their feet. The foundering risk is always super high. The management, keeping them off the grass, keeping their hay managed. It's a lot more work, but no doubt. People think that hard keepers are they are. Hard keepers are hard because you are putting as much as you can into it. But I would say that the easy keepers are harder.
Yeah.
Because it comes down to us. It's more work for us to manage the easy keepers because we have to watch their hay intake. We can't just throw them out on a round bale all day long. We can't just throw them in the field with grass because otherwise their feet are going to fall through the floor.
Yeah.
It's so much work for us to do it. We have to ride them more, right?
Yeah.
We have to get them huffing and puffing, and we have to get the heart rate up. We have to get the oxygen, the carbon dioxide pumping as much as we can. And that relies so much on us. And if we aren't going to do it, they're going to suffer.
Yeah, this is
So
such a good
that's my hard part.
reminder on conditioning. And I know we've been harping on this on our show too, that, people, I think they get so obsessed with the idea of competing that they go out and they practice the competition on weekends. But like, are you investing the time to ensure that your pony has a level of fitness to do what you need it to do? And, in our sport where you're going out there and you're surging at a gallop, but coming back resting, surging, like we do the sprinting kind of sport.
Yeah.
Are you conditioning for it? And it's interesting to think, like, you're making me think, okay, well, am I feeding for it when I go away to competition even? And now I've completely changed the dynamic and I'm making my horse work for 6 hours. And,
Right.
you know,
Right. When we
Huge,
don't ride
and
them for
that's-
6 hours every single day, but we do
Yeah.
when we go to competitions. But I will confess that I don't feed my horse really any different when we
No.
go to competitions. I just
Yeah.
think, keep the
Yeah.
food the same. That's the safest option. But
Absolutely. And that is a huge thing. You saying that's the safest option. I mean, it is, right? Because especially when you're hauling long term, that that's already stressful.
Yeah.
Right.
I say all the time, we domesticated horses and forced them to evolve faster than they can handle. Horses are not meant to be thrown in a metal box and driven 6 hours down the road and then ran on and off for 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
They're like, their bodies are not made for that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so capable of it, but evolution wise, if we go look at these, BLM Mustangs, the body condition, like what they're doing is just so different.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the fields. We're domesticating them, like putting them in a grass field with one forage source, right? Or limited forage source. When they're out in the wild, they're utilizing all of the forage sources. They have all the different microbes in their gut to be able to handle that. So it is commonly the safe option to keep them as similar as possible. They say if your horse is colicking, don't try to give it a bunch of stuff. Don't try to throw rice bran. Don't give it sand clear. Don't do all of these things because you're changing and you're adding things to the gut microbiome that it wasn't used to. But we also have to consider, in this case, we're taking up so much more calories. Trailering, I preach this all the time. Trailering in itself is a huge workout. Mm-hmm. I would argue to say that what you're doing in your physical races and your games is trailering is just as hard on their body. It takes up just as much energy and calories.
It's like, have you ever stood in the back of a trailer? Yeah.
I used to always joke, that's how we teach people. Get on in. And then that Yellowstone episode came out and everyone was like, oh my God. Like, I can never get in the back of a trailer. It's like, okay, it's not really that bad.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But you're right.
I'm huge on rest. Rest is a huge part of that. If you can get to the games, a day early and give your horse that day to relax the muscles and rebuild, recover the muscles and be able to get out there and start over. That's a huge, easy prevention, right? Mm-hmm. Another big one that checks a lot of boxes for me is alfalfa. People are so afraid of alfalfa. Another one of the huge fads. Alfalfa makes horses hot. Alfalfa is terrible. Alfalfa on average has lower NSC than a grass mix hay. So for these obese and metabolic horses, it's not a horrible thing. And in this case, for the average obese halflinger that just exists in your field, maybe alfalfa might not be the choice because it is it's a great source of super available protein. It is a higher energy hay, but the NSC values are so low that in this case with you guys, with your ponies, having that is definitely not a bad thing. Alfalfa is also a great natural stomach buffer. It's something that's really good to feed in the trailer. Any sort of hay like that, in general, that long stem forage is going to make them chew. We all know horses chew kind of in a circular motion. Mm-hmm. And what that does, and there's a very loud dirt bike going by.
It's okay. You're good.
Sorry, I couldn't even hear myself then.
She's like, wait a second. You're fine.
So how they do the circular chewing motion, and it's the same with humans. Our teeth, our mouth, we are creating enzymes while we chew that are breaking down different nutrients in that. So by that motion, the horses are able to create enzymes that can break down digestive enzymes. It helps with aiding the digestive system. It helps with creating more saliva, right? We're reducing chances of colic or choke by doing that constantly. So making sure that they have plenty of hay to be munching on is always going to be huge. And like I said, the alfalfa, in your guys' case, I wouldn't be afraid of it. And that is something, though, that I would consider. You don't necessarily just want to chuck it to them on the trailer, right? That's something that you want them to kind of get used to, but you may be able to feed more of it when you're out at games. You might just feed a few handfuls. There's a lot of good options right now on the product market for chopped forages, which is great because it's an alfalfa blend. They're small pieces. I like to feed it on top of the grain. It works great for these metabolic ponies too, that we feel bad they're only getting like a little handful of grain that, it makes them feel like they're chewing longer, they're doing more, but it's creating those digestive enzymes. It's going to help aid in digestion as well. So that's a good way to kind of ease them into it, where they're getting it all the time, but not at a high level. But then come competition time, we're able to support the gut. We're able to provide more energy in a safe way with a low, starch and sugar value. So that's something that I would suggest considering when it comes down to, again, if it doesn't work for your horse, it doesn't. And if you're not comfortable doing it, your peace of mind and letting you sleep at night is more important, because like I can't tell you how many times that I've sat up at night, worrying about, oh my gosh, should I have given that to them? Is this a horrible idea? So if it's going to absolutely pain you and not make you sleep at night, then it's not worth it. But I do think that it's worth a shot in this situation.
Now you mentioned biotin, which makes me
right.
start
I know. I was just about to hear the conversation. I was like, okay, let's talk about feet. I have a pony with foot issues right now, so I'm like, I want to talk about biotin. My vet and my farrier literally told me to put my pony on a biotin supplement because he has extremely thin soles and he needs help and support. So that makes me think, okay, well, the feed that I've been feeding him for the last 3 years now must not be providing the biotin that he needs, or should I be looking more so at like forage, like the hay and the grass that he's eating? I don't know where biotin comes from.
And I think that we're definitely going to be reaching out about a consultation here after this too. So.
I'm for it. I'm for it. I think that it'll be good. The finding out, like I said, more about your personal horse, like it really makes you revisit the whole situation and really helps you consider. But that's another thing that I do, like, and I kept my business very broad. I kept my business very broad because I've done a lot. I've managed large barns. I've done hay fields. I've managed, so I have a little bit in everything. And a big part of working with the owners is the management side of it. So working with what works for you guys. It may not be feed. So in your instance, I may, and I'm going to suggest, if you are able to turn out your horse with, they have these easy ride trail boots, right? Something that's easy like that to help kind of protect the sole when it's not, we're protecting it while we don't want anything happening in the background, right? We don't want him stepping on a stone out in the field. We're saving it for when you need it. As far as a nutrition standpoint, adding biotin, a lot of the feeds nowadays do boast that they provide supplemental biotin. Certain feeds, though, are not. There's whatever biotin is naturally found, but biotin is a supplement. If we're feeding the horse properly and providing them all the nutrition they need. Now, if the horse has naturally thin soles, then that's when a supplement's important. But if we take a step back and we realize that, we're not feeding at the rate we're supposed to, the horse isn't carrying its weight the way that I want it to, because that can all have an effect, right? If the horse isn't, if it's too obese or it's not carrying the weight properly, it's going to affect the balance that they put on their feet. That could be affecting the wear and tear of their foot. That could be why, moving that weight around, getting them to shift back. Sometimes it's a training standpoint. I'm really, really lucky. I get to work with a lot of balance through movement, style, body workers and trainers. So there's sometimes when I'm calling them and saying, hey, what exercises can we have them do to get this horse to move back on its hind end a little bit more, to be able to help with those angles of the feet, to help get them, in a more comfortable position. One, that's helping them build muscle. The muscle and the exercise is going to work really well with the nutrition standpoint. But I see a lot of benefits in the feet when we actually use both of them together, because there's, again, so many different variables of what could be affecting the feet. It could be the weather. if it's been crazy dewy lately and your horse is out on the grass, that could be a huge part why they have sensitive soles. Vice versa, if it's been super dry, they're going to get super hard, and then you get horses' hooves cracking and looking horrible. And that's, in my standpoint, I show Western pleasure. So when I am in there with hoof conditioner all summer long when we were in this drought this year, because the last thing I need is to go out into, a halter class and they're like, what is that? So like, there's so many aspects of it. So, and yes, it could be nutritional. When it comes to the vets and farriers, they have other things to focus on, right? And that's why I love working with vets and farriers. Again, I'm so lucky in what I do because the nutrition is the core of so much of it. Yeah. I get to work with everybody in the industry. I get to do and find out what works for the horse. But I rely, unfortunately, sometimes on the owner to actually follow through and do it. And sometimes it's tough. I see a horse that could really benefit and I give them everything that I can. But if the owner or, if they're not going to stick with it, we're not going to see the results that, the potential that I know that horse could be. I learned that in the rescue side of things too, that not every horse is going to look how I want it to look. But again, it's your horse and I have to take a step back, and our goals, my goal is to meet your goals. So whatever you want it to be, but so whether it be feed, management, supplement, we can definitely take a look and see how we can do with the feet and see if we can make some progress there. And I'm happy to work with, your farrier if they have a recommendation or they see something in particular, if they really, really believe in a certain supplement, maybe we can go in and see, okay, what's in that supplement and where can I find it in the feed, right? Mm-hmm. Where does this come from? Where do these things come from? Okay, where can I find it in a forage source or in the feed? Because your feed really should be able to do it all.
Right.
I really try to get people to drop the supplement, feed it how it's supposed to be. And 9 times out of 10, we're golden.
I mean, I love the idea of saving money. So
me too.
And that's another huge thing. I say that my MO is like, I want to be able to save you as much money as it costs to have me come out and do it. Right. Yeah. Because a lot of the times I can, like, in the amount of money you're throwing supplements or you're buying a feed that has such a high feeding rate, because people are so afraid of, I call it sticker shock. Yeah. They see these expensive bags of grain on the thing. They're like, well, I'm not buying a $40 bag of grain. Well, if you did, you'd be saving $400 a year because the volume is so different. They are putting so much higher quality ingredients in there. You're able to feed it at a lower rate. You're getting so much more out of it. And in my ideal world, everybody wants their horses to be their happiest and healthiest self, regardless of the situation. So I try as best as I can to make that happen. But of course, in consideration of the owner's budget and also, region. There's certain feeds that are only available in certain areas. I can't tell everyone go use Stride Animal Health, because you have to order it online and you're spending that much more. Or Bluebonnet feeds, it's not accessible here. So we have to find something that's accessible in this area. Yeah. Another thing that's hard too, a big company that I work with, Cargill all the time, or Nutrina or Pro Elite or Pro Force, however of Cargill. But I struggle with them a lot because I can't get ingredient lists because they're nationwide. So if I want an ingredient list, it takes me a few days. I've started collecting them as time goes on so that I don't have to keep doing it. But because what we call something here may be called something totally different in California.
Okay. Interesting.
So the ingredients are different. Yeah. They're not. They're the same. It's the same idea. It's the same guaranteed analysis, but where they're getting it, where they're milling it is going to look different. So it also another consideration to see. A lot of people on the guaranteed analysis, you can't see the calorie content. Yeah. So when you call someone like me, I have all the calorie contents. And that's when I do a nutritional evaluation and we find out the whole big picture. I can use all of that information to find out how many calories your horse is supposed to be having. Are we meeting that baseline requirement? Are we exceeding it? In a case of obesity, are we underfeeding it? In the case of a hard keeper, what I want to see them at and why I think that, then I can kind of piece together the puzzle of this is a product recommendation I think this would suit, this horse a lot.
So you have a pony that's been competing. goes off because he's got sensitive soles, and you walk out to the field and he is a literal whale. And,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
you know, the extra 150, 200 pounds have piled on. Just and there's
Genevieve's
been very little
not
change.
describing my pony at all.
That's too
And-
funny. But what happened was, I bet you weren't riding or doing as much as you were with it before.
Right. I could not. And at the same exact time that all happened, he got put in timeout because he was playing too hard with his friends. So I wasn't riding him, and he didn't have his 5 other
His
pasture
field, yeah.
mates to
buddies to keep him
pester.
in shape.
And he just blew up like a balloon. I call him my hippo now. It only took 2
That's
months,
too
and
funny.
he's a hippo.
Yes.
And so-
it changes fast.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And when you think
so
of
now I'm
weight
trying to figure
loss-
out how to just cut the
Yeah.
calories. But I already feel like I wasn't feeding him very much to begin with. He's only out in the pasture like 4 hours a day. I just purchased some muzzle recently because I was like, okay, I guess we gotta muzzle him. He's not on
Yeah.
a round bale. Like, do we have to go to a dry lot? So I'm like in this
Mhm.
place where I feel like you just have to give it time and test different things, like you said. Give it a certain amount of time and see if you see any results. If you don't, go from there.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I mean, we're impatient, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure when you say, I'm going to pick something and stick with it. Okay, but if you give it another 2 months, we could have doubled the weight, if it wasn't working. So that's something
Yes.
we've got to pick a goal and get effective quickly.
Yeah.
And that comes into another management standpoint. Like you said, I mean, when they're on stall rest or when, they're out of work, we can only pull them down so much without risking losing that vitamin and mineral requirement, right? So a lot of times they're getting the bare minimum of a balancer. It literally ends up being like a kitchen cup of feed and you feel like it's just a treat to them. You feel terrible. But that's when it comes down to a management standpoint. A dry lot, a muzzle is a great option. I mean, you already have taken pretty much the hay away. Another way, what I would do is I would come in, I would get a calorie requirement. I would get a volume intake requirement based on the body weight, which would, in a case of losing, be about 1% of the body weight. Regularly for maintenance, we want to be at about, depending on the metabolic factor of the horse, between 1.5% and 2% of body weight. If we want to gain, we want to be in that 2.5% to 3%. And then if we want to lose, we want to be in that 1.5 to 1 body weight volume intake. So what I would say is then we say, okay, well, it's only getting 1 pound of balancer a day. So of its body weight percentage, we take 1 pound out of that. Okay, that's left of our forage requirement. We also have to look at the calorie requirement of it and see how those fit together and what type of hay, in that case, we want a lower quality hay, but we have to be careful because a low quality hay is what's going to make a hay belly when you're out of work, right? So we can't be feeding too much. Really comes down to a management standpoint. What hay can we get? We have to kind of work backwards then and see what do we have and how can we use this to our benefit? How can we make what we have work? A muzzle is a great option. They're becoming very, very popular. Muzzles are great. They can restrict up to like 80% of intake, which is huge.
It's crazy, yeah.
The problem that a lot of people don't realize, and again, we all kill our horses with love. They say, oh, well, you've been really good. You've had your muzzle on, we'll take it off. I'll let you graze for a little bit.
Exactly.
They'll make up that 80% in 1 hour.
It's crazy.
So if you were going to muzzle, you muzzle 24/7.
I had
No
no
mercy.
idea.
I
Oh my
joke.
gosh.
No mercy
No
muzzling.
mercy.
You have to keep it on.
Oh no.
Because if you don't, they're going to gorge and they are
Yeah.
going to not only make up everything that we just tried to save, right? But then we're at risk of, colic. They're stuffing their faces. They're getting as much as they can.
Yeah.
So it's just something, once you start it, you have to be considerate of what you're doing. That's why dry lots are becoming super popular now too. A dry lot gives us, they don't have to wear a muzzle, right? And we all know they're Houdinis out there. They will figure out how to get that muzzle off. You can zip tie it to whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's gone. Thank God they make them in bright orange now, so you can see them way out in the field. But you have to consider a dry lot too. It's also going to help your fields, right?
Yeah.
Because then we're creating kind of a sacrifice area where we're sacrificing an area to be a dry lot where then we can pull all the horses off the grass and actually allow the grass in the fields to thrive and produce a better yield which in turn down the line could actually save you more money, right?
Yeah.
So dry lots are great too, because you can put up hay bags, which means you can manage how much hay that they're getting.
Yeah.
Hay bags are great too, because they're a slow feeder. It makes them slow down. We're able to go in. I love a luggage scale. If I'm weighing feed, I use a flat food scale. If I'm weighing hay, I use a luggage scale. It's awesome. Super easy.
cool.
Hang it
Yeah.
on the net and find out exactly how much, because in this case, when you have this, evaluation done, you're going to know, okay, well, my horse can get, 15 pounds of hay. So, if you're going to give it to him 3 times a day, he needs to get his 5 pounds 3 times a day, which is about 1 flake.
Yeah.
If you consider that, which is very sad.
Crazy.
Very sad for a horse who's supposed to be grazing all the time. But the idea is to, once they get to a less weight, then, we can kind of reevaluate and get more weight on them. Or when they come back into work, you start to see the weight drop, and then we have to worry about making sure we're supplementing the calories. So
is there a case
it's
then?
a lot of back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Right. Lots of juggling.
So I know a lot of people, when they stable their ponies, they're like, well, as long as they're inside, I want them to have something to chew on. I want them to have hay. And so they tend to just keep putting the flakes of hay in, not necessarily rationing it. I feel like there's even in my barn, there's times where there's no consideration for how many calories are really in hay and how that potentially can impact the pony one way or another. But if you're restricting it, can a horse go 12 hours without grazing technically? How does that work,
There's
I
a
guess?
few studies and research I've done. So this will actually circle us right back. In some studies, it's 1 hour. Some studies, it's 4 to 5 hours. Some studies, it's 6, where that's how little time it takes for ulcers to begin to form.
Interesting. Okay.
Wow.
So by eating hay, we are keeping the digestive system motile.
Sure.
They're made for that, right? Where they're made to take in small volumes, which also goes back to why small volume in some of these horses is more beneficial, because that's how they're meant to eat, right?
Yeah.
So keeping something in the stomach, keeping the acid, as minimal as possible, is going to help us not start ulcers. If we are leaving their stomach, same as we get, when you wake up in the morning and you're starving and your stomach starts to hurt, that's stomach acid that's irritating your stomach. It's the same exact thing. We are made to have meals at a time, and we're satiated. They are not satiated. They're made to continue to eat. So 12 hours, I would say absolutely never would I let my horse go I would never want my horse to go more than 5 hours without any hay. And that's again based on, but I've seen research where they've shown that after an hour, it's possible for them to start forming. It all comes down to your horse.
Yeah.
If it's predisposed to ulcers, if it's in a stressful situation, there's tons of different things to look at, but there's possibilities. And as far as consideration of calories in the sport that you do, I wouldn't be too concerned, right? Because you're working your horses constantly. So those extra calories, they're going to be used. They're going to be used well. Now in a situation like Carly, your horse, may not, we may have to consider that a little bit more, because we definitely don't want to just, I feel bad, toss him some more hay, because that could end up being detrimental. If your barn feels bad and you don't know that this horse is getting extra hay at night, then your whole time frame and goals is out the window based off of something you can't even control because you didn't know.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to good communication, and management is the hardest part. Like I said, it's all on the owner.
Yeah. What about slow feeder hay nets?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're pro. Yeah.
Yeah, pro. If anything, for the horses that can only get 5 pounds at a time, it helps them draw it out.
Yeah.
The only times that I worry about them, of course, if your horse is wearing shoes. We also there's a lot of controversy too, as far as where we're hanging the hay nets, right? Because when it's on the ground and your horse, you can't put it on the ground. Your horse has shoes, it's going to get its foot stuck or its shoe stuck. It's a horrifying idea. But if we have them up super high, right, then we're risking all that dust from the hay going right into the nostrils. Then we're worried about heaves. We're worried about, dust and mold allergies, anything like that. So I actually love, and I tell people this all the time. Like I said, I work with I actually work with this osteopathic dentist, and she's amazing. Shout out Elizabeth Voss. She's lovely. And her co-pilot. after working with them, I've learned that it's actually really beneficial to move the hay nets around and to actually offer multiple hay stations. For different reasons. So moving it around and having them kind of at higher and lower spots, what that actually does is the horse's mouth, the way it sits, I'll try to like show. When they're reaching down, the mouth is going to move down. When they're reaching up, so their jaw moves in that way. So by moving it in different locations where they're putting their head up, down, we're actually increasing the motility in the jaw, keeping the TMJ loose. It's actually helping them, have more of that circular motion, having more digestive enzymes being produced. So that's a big way that it also helps the horses, it's having them in different places. It gives them a sense of, I don't want to say that they're in charge, but it's foraging. They feel like they have the option and they get to pick where they eat from. They get to move around. They get a change of scenery, right? They see one friend on one side. They see one friend on the other side. It's a good way to keep their mind busy, especially if they're going to be in the stall, all night long. It's beneficial in multiple ways for sure. But I always disclaim, if your horse is wearing shoes, definitely be careful about using hay nets, because that's the last thing you need is for one of them to paw at it. And then you come and your horse's foot is hung up.
Yeah,
no. It's a horrible thing to come home to. And if you're going to do a hay net, go for the smaller hole. They make them in bags now with like a hole in the middle with a net. Yeah. That's great. I don't actually have one out right now that I can't stand. I can't wait to get rid of it. But the holes on it are huge. Yeah. At that point, all the hay's falling through.
Yeah, exactly. They just take chunks out.
Even using it. Yeah, they're just taking, or they have the bags that it's just a hole. And I'm well, it's not a slow feeder at that point. It's just to hold it off the ground. So make sure you're using what works for you. They also do make slow feeders for round bales. If anybody is ever in a situation where round bales are needed.
Our barn does that.
Yeah, it's necessary. There's just so many different disciplines, breeds of horses, that it's the management is the hardest part for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely worth, I think, getting a consultation. And one more subject I was thinking about is aging ponies too. In our sport, we find that a lot because one, it's ponies, and these ponies are athletes and have been for years. Very often they compete well into 30. Like they are still going strong. And I've found too, over the years, you get a pony up into like 25 and you're like, oh, maybe he needs to be retired. And as soon as you stop working it, they tend to go downhill. Like they like having the structure and they like being engaged. But we find like my mom's pony, who's been competing for like 15 years, he's 24 now, is running low on teeth and he can't eat hay. You start getting to a point where you soak like hay cubes or you give him an opportunity to maybe forage that way. But now I'm thinking, well, quantity. I mean, now he's just engulfing it as fast as he can and then sits there with a full belly of just hay cubes until evening. How would you manage it with a senior? Is it different when you approach it?
Little toothless baby.
It's again, it all comes down to management and how much you can do, because in a case where you have all of the capability, right, you're at your own. Another reason a dry lot might be good. Keeping them on the grass is not going to be bad, but if you're throwing them on the field that is super low, right? Because, all my horses who have teeth already ate this grass, and I'm going to throw this horse on there because he can't really eat it anyway. Well, those little pieces of grass are going to have the most starch and sugar, which is going to end up affecting that senior horse more. That maybe it already has Cushing's, or maybe it's predisposed to Cushing's. It's lots of the ponies I know, or it's more common. So by having to, I kind of have a system of, okay, your horse can't eat long stem hay anymore, right? We're losing teeth. So then we go to a chopped forage. Can your horse handle a chopped forage, 2 to 4 inch pieces without quitting it? Cool. We're going to stick with that until it starts quitting it, right? We're going to stick with that as long as we can, because that's the closest we can get to the long stem forage. Next up would be the cubes. The cubes are, 1/2 inch to 1 inch pieces. So you have to soak them. It's a pain. I know some places that don't. I know tons of places out west that don't soak them. But you still have to have good hardy teeth for that. So soaking them, something that I've seen and I suggest for the senior horses to manage, or the horses that need the weight, that don't have the teeth or are old, you can still kind of do those hay stations I was talking about. They do make slow feeder buckets, or you can get some sort of way to kind of put little stations around the field. It gives them kind of a grazing feel without sitting there finishing each bucket, right?
Yeah.
So if you can create less quantity in more places, it kind of
Yeah.
forces them to walk around. That's a good way to do it. Feeding them multiple times a day. If it's a possibility to bring them in for a lunch and supply, a little bit more, even if it's a pellet or a hay, or you just split up the feeding into 3, that's going to be a huge help. Any way that we can make it a grazing kind
Yeah.
of situation is going to be ideal. Because, when we get into cubes are kind of on the line, but the chopped hay and the long stem forage, that's just going to sit. We call it like a bed of straw. That's another reason it's great for ulcer prevention, before on the trailer, because it creates like a splash barrier basically, right? So the stomach acid isn't splashing on the walls and the lining of the stomach. We're getting that, but that's not accounting for volume, right? When I was talking about, I don't want these ponies to have crazy volume. When we get into tons of cubes, it's getting heavy. It's starting to sink more, like the pellets do, alfalfa or hay pellets. That accounts for volume, right? So we have to consider how much we're pumping into them at one feeding, because we're thinking, oh, well, this is a hay pellet. This doesn't count towards my 4 pounds of senior feed that he's getting, but it does. And we go back to that body weight. If they are starting to lose weight because they don't have teeth, we're sitting in that 2 to 2.5% body weight range. We still are supposed to meet that volume intake in order to maintain or to gain. So we have to figure out a way to get that volume into them. And it comes down again to management and being able to put the time in and either feed them multiple times a day or put them in a situation, which I understand that it's not accessible to a lot of people, but that's where we see that ponies go downhill fast, or not even just ponies, all horses, as they get older, they go downhill because we're not able to accommodate the needs that they have anymore, which is unfortunate. Exercising them is great. I have had a few people recently be like, oh, you just turned 22, I'm retiring it. And I'm like, what?
Why?
I'm like, my horse better be going past 22.
I know, right?
Like, she was expensive. Like, you better keep it moving. But I just like to say, I mean, it's same for people.
Yeah.
The more active that they stay, the higher spirits they're in, the more structure and routine, the more excited they are about the day. It's sad when you have to put them out to pasture for the last time and you see that, like, they don't have that
Exactly.
energy anymore. They're just kind of, their eyes are starting to drain, and that's how it's time for a good day. But the being able to manage them as best you can is tough for the people who can't, who are boarding or not in a place that they can do that for them. But that's what I would suggest. If he needs
huge.
it. I mean, my trainer's horse had, she gave lessons until she had no teeth. She ate basically liquid slop and same thing. And she lived until she was 38.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And
I love
happy,
it.
giving lessons till the very end. Like, she knew her job. She loved it. And it's possible, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm meeting more and more horses the horses are living longer.
They really are.
And I like to think that the feed industry is doing something right, right? It's not, we're getting somewhere, but I'd love to see just management more accessible, but it's just so difficult. Same with the hard keepers. I'd love to see people feed them 3-4 times a day.
Yes.
It's not gonna happen, but I'd love to see it.
It makes me think. So we had I've been off and on into bodybuilding for all my adult life, but we really buckled down
awesome.
like the past year, and we were working with a coach and we were doing nutrition and we broke up our meals, and I felt like we were eating more comparatively and digesting it better and more efficiently with the way that we had broken it up, because you were eating smaller meals more frequently versus like you're dumping that one big meal and feeling satiated. And it just keeps making me think, like, hey, when we manage ourselves that way, it's so effective. Why have I never thought about doing that with my horse?
People think it's so different, but it's really not. It's really similar. And my wife, she did bodybuilding competitions the last few, not recently, but a few years back. And she was the same way. She was like, the way that we eat, like in regular daily life, because she's like, I kind of want to do it again. And I said, well, do it. And she was like, no, it was horrible.
It's hard.
I have to discipline myself and eat. I have to eat constantly all day long, and I have to work out. And I just was like, okay, well, I'll support you if you want to do it. And she's like, no.
It truly is
Never
like
do
a
it again.
foraging lifestyle. Like you're
Yeah.
consistently eating
Yeah.
all the time, packing those meals. But definitely, like
Mhm.
from gut health perspective, it has never been healthier than when I was on like a clean bodybuilding type plan where it
Yeah.
was
Right.
predictable and consistent. But I was
Yeah. And
thinking
in that
too,
case,
go ahead.
I was just saying you were probably eating, really good source protein
Yep.
and great,
Yep.
you're probably picking the organic or, the
Exactly.
better vegetables. And it's the
All
same
the
idea when
veggies.
we look at a bag of feed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more expensive bag of feed, the better quality, the more bioavailability, the better results, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same idea.
No, I'm so excited about your business because it rings a lot of bells. And I'm like, well, why have we never done that? And you're right. I think too, people who've been in the industry and like, I've been doing the horse thing for 20 some years and I'm like 30, right? So you start thinking, oh, I got this figured out and a routine sets in and you just get comfortable with your ponies. But like, are there better ways to create efficiencies, better ways to approach it? Like, I think it's good to take a fresh perspective and get someone out to look at your pony. Like, that's so huge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's tough because the people who are so like stuck in their ways and I'm big on collaboration happens at the top, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
always wanting to learn constantly and even if it's unsolicited advice and I may not appreciate it in the moment, it definitely gets me thinking, right? And
Mhm.
it makes me kind of look at my bigger picture. And whether your goal is to save money, that's fine. Like that
Yeah.
is totally acceptable, right? But it's also okay to ask for help and do that. And that's why I try to make as educational and available to everyone as possible. I'm happy to work with anybody on, I want my service to be available to you. I want your horse to do better. I want you to be happier. I want to be in your corner supporting you. Like I cannot wait to come see some mounted games. I saw one at the World Horse Expo when
Yep.
we went 2 years ago, and we were like mesmerized. I think it was the first time I had seen it, and I was like, "What is happening?"
It's crazy.
My friend, I was telling her about this, and my friend was like, "What is it?" And I was like, "Pull up YouTube right now. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna love this. Like
Yep.
it's so cool." But it's so different, like from what I do.
It really
So
is.
I like you guys are way cooler than me because you guys are going full speed ahead, doing all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, my mare like picks up an extended trot and I'm like, no, let's go back to a jog. I like my little slow pretty girl. Like that's all I need. She's like, but I want to be fast today. I'm like, no, that's okay. Like you guys and all my friends barrel race. Like we actually,
Yeah.
we call ourselves the Five Mares because who doesn't, right? But we actually run a Gymkhana style speed show in Southern Maryland
Oh,
called
cool.
Oh,
the
cool.
Crab Pot. And my good friend owns a feed store as well called the Krabby Mare. So that's kind of where it all comes from. She pretty much runs it. But so we all run the speed show and I announced for it, right? And I'm like, what is going on? I could never go out there. Like my horse would be like, what are we
Breakneck
doing
speed.
here? Like it's insane watching these, and there's like kids out there. Like I understand the kids probably have no fear, but we've had people ask us for like a senior, like a 55 and over division because
Mhm.
these women and men are out here full speed ahead. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Awesome.
y'all
That's
are
awesome.
crazy.
One of our largest divisions is the O25, and at least 50% of that is going to be people who are,
50s.
50s.
And
And
up.
That is amazing.
up to 80, honestly. Like we
Yep.
have people who are
That
playing
is
mounted games at
absolutely
that
amazing.
age. And you're right.
They're
It's all about,
competitive still. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I
staying
love it.
active. Like just
Yep.
stay active, take care of your body, listen to your body, and
Yeah.
take care of your pony. So it's huge. So definitely plug your
Absolutely.
business. Again,
Yep.
your new business is
Yes. Alfa Equine. If anybody needs anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook. My email is nutrition@alfaequine.com. And yeah, I would love to meet you and your horses, and let's get you guys happy and healthy and on a good budget that works for you.
absolutely. And we
Awesome.
will
Thank you
plug
so much.
in the description. We're going to have a link to your email and to your page, definitely, so that people can
Awesome.
find you. This has been so much fun. This is so different than just talking
Yeah,
about
thank you
like
so much.
just games. And we'd definitely love to have you back someday too, as hopefully this channel continues to
Absolutely.
grow. It's so fun.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I would love to. I'll come back whenever.
Absolutely. So, guys, if you are watching, please go to our YouTube and subscribe. It is so important that we continue growing our YouTube presence. We're starting to get a little bit bigger here on Facebook. We're topping like 115 followers, which is awesome, but we need to grow that YouTube platform because YouTube is the second biggest search engine on the internet. And once we get to 100 followers, we can launch our podcasting platform. Thank you so much for watching. Check back next time.
You're listening to Unbridled with your host, Genevieve and Carly. Welcome to Unbridled.